So with all of these American whalers wintering over up there, with lots of alcohol and guns and all kinds of problems, the Canadian government really was showing no interest at all in asserting their Canadian Arctic sovereignty. Word began to trickle back about what was happening up there, and eventually two Anglican missionaries went up and they wrote back to the government and they said, you've got a problem here. This Canadian island is completely taken over by Americans. There's lots of drinking. They're giving alcohol to the indigenous people here. They're giving them guns, and they're making babies. And there's just no law. There's nobody enforcing the law, Canadian law. And there was just nothing happened. Eventually, towards the end of the whaling era, they sent out two police officers to try and police what was really a drunken raucous mob of about 1,500 whalers. And they had to show up, and then in order to patrol that whole area, they had to ask favors of the whalers to take them to the other islands to try and assert the law. So this really, the only reason why things got better was because the fashion industry changed, and they no longer wanted the baleen for the fashion industry, and somebody in Canada had discovered what was later called kerosene, and so they no longer needed whale oil. Good thing too, because the whale stocks were very much diminished. So the whalers left, and things sort of went back to normal. At one point, North Star and all the other people from Banks Island, all the ships from Bangkok, ended up on the mainland, and they got iced in, and they decided to settle there, and Banks Island sat uninhabited because they were very comfortable, these Inuit, down on the mainland. Unfortunately, the Cold War came along, and with Banks Island sitting about halfway between Russia and the United States, the rumors were that missile silos were going to be built by Russia on Banks Island. And there's also rumors that the United States was planning on doing the same, and so the Canadian government had a problem. They couldn't use St. Roch because St. Roch had since been retired, and they needed a ship and people to go up there in order to assert Canadian Arctic sovereignty. So they went to Fred Carpenter, who was the leader in that area, and they asked him if he would please take North Star full of volunteers back up to Banks Island and to hold it for Queen and Country. Now, Fred was a very, very proud Canadian, and he loved the Queen, and he agreed to do it, but only if he had two things met. And the first was that he wanted a school built at Banks Island so that his kids and the other kids up on the island would not have to go to residential school. The other thing was that he wanted better radio reception so he could get the CBC, because all he was getting was an American radio station. And the government readily agreed to this, and Fred was able to fill North Star with enough volunteers. Actually, there were so many volunteers, they got a second ship named Reindeer, and they went up and they held the land for Queen and Country at the western entrance to Canada's Northwest Passage. And for this, Fred was given a special medal from Queen Elizabeth that he wore on his caribou anorak for the rest of his life.